Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Welcome back to Spanish Classes with Professor Jason. I'm going to pull out the whiteboard again for this lesson. I think it'll be good for this topic, which happens to be an introduction to the use of the present subjunctive mood in Spanish with verbs of persuasion or volition. Cases in which somebody wants or requests or needs or asks somebody else to do something, all right? So here we go. Present subjunctive with verbs of persuasion or volition. Take a look. So, in this lesson, what I'm going to do is talk about three things basically. I'm going to review how to form the verbs in the subjunctive, or how to conjugate in the subjunctive for AR, ER, IR verbs. We'll also look at some examples of verbs that have irregular yo forms in the present indicative. And we're going to talk about syntactical structure, or the grammatical formula that sort of triggers the usage of the subjunctive. And finally, I'll give quite a few examples so you can see the subjunctive in some everyday types of sentences, okay? So first of all, let's take a look or a review, because I have another video that's already been uploaded on the form. So just a quick review. How do you form the subjunctive conjugation of verbs? Well, the first step is that you take the yo form, okay? The yo form, the first person singular of the verb in the indicative. So if it's an AR verb like hablar, okay, the yo form is yo hablo, okay? What you do is you delete or remove the final O, and then since this is an AR verb, hablar, what you do is you use the opposite vowel endings, okay? So with hablar, the subjunctive form is going to be hable, yo hable, tú hables. It's important not to emphasize the final syllable when you pronounce these, because it's the second to last syllable that's emphasized usually. Hable, hables, hable. Okay. We also have we, hablemos. Okay. Hablemos. You all, familiar in Spain, habléis, habléis, and you all, formal, or you all in Latin America, hablen, or they, okay, hablen, okay, accented syllable again, the second to last, hablen, all right? So that would be a regular AR verb. You can see that we started with the yo form, then we took the opposite vowel to form our endings. Since it's AR verb, these opposite vowel endings, okay? So just really quickly, I'll go through some examples of how to form the subjunctive with an ER and an IR verb. As an example of an ER verb, let's take a look at the verb, very common verb, to eat, comer. Okay? Again, most important step here is to go to the yo form, the first person singular of the present indicative. Yo, as we all know, como, I eat. Again, we're going to remove that O from the first person singular of the indicative and go with the opposite vowel form here to produce our endings. So the subjunctive for yo is coma, for tú is comas, for he, she, or usted would be coma, okay? And then we have comamos, comáis, and coman. Again, so it's that idea of starting with the yo form and then adding the opposite vowel endings, so to speak, okay? An IR verb is going to be similar, and I'll give one example of an IR verb. And again, this is just review on the forms. I'm going to talk in a second about when to use the subjunctive and what syntactical structures trigger the subjunctive. But just as an example of an IR verb, I'll use escribir, which is what I'm doing right now, right? To write. It's an IR verb. Can't forget the key step, which is to conjugate it in the first person singular, the yo form of the present indicative. We all know that would be yo escribo. To remove that first or that final O, and to give an opposite vowel ending. So the subjunctive for the yo form would be escriba, and that one would generate the other forms. Escribas, he, she, or usted, escriba, right? We write, escribamos. And again, emphasizing that second to last syllable with the exception of the vosotros form, escribáis, escriban. I only mention that because students tend to have a tendency to emphasize the final syllable, since that's what we're changing. It's a little bit different than what they're used to. but when you pronounce these, it's important to remember to stress the second to last syllable. Yo escriba, tú escribas, él escriba, escribamos, with the exception here, escribáis and escriban. Okay, that's in the oral production. Okay, so that was just a quick review on the forms of the subjunctive, and I do have a separate YouTube lesson on the subjunctive. All right, so let's move on to the structure that sort of triggers the use of the subjunctive. Okay, there's a specific syntactical arrangement of the elements in a sentence that will trigger the subjunctive. And I'm going to give an example to illustrate this. Okay, the example here is a sentence like mi mamá quiere que tú hagas la cama. Let's get a little bit long here. What we have here is a complex sentence that has two clauses divided by the word que. We have one subject, which is mi mamá. Then we have a first verb, which in this case is quiere. Then we have the word que. It's important to realize that this is a formula that triggers the subjunctive. Then we have a second subject, which is important because to have the subjunctive, this subject and this subject, in our examples, mamá y tú, have to be different people. And then a second verb, okay? And in our case here, it's the second verb that's actually conjugated in the subjunctive. Now, what determines whether or not a second verb in a dependent clause like que tú hagas la cama is conjugated in the subjunctive is the character or the class of this first verb here. Okay, the verb of the main clause. So we have a main clause, mi mamá quiere, and then we have que, and we have the dependent clause, tú hagas la cama. In this case, our verb in the main clause, querer, denotes persuasion or volition, that one person wants another person to do something. And so we're going to look at other examples that use this formula and some other verbs of volition. One person wanting or trying to convince or persuade another person to do something. Okay, so if that's the case with our main verb, we're going to have a subjunctive mood in the second clause here. All right, so remember, subject, verb que, second subject, and then a verb conjugated in the subjunctive. That's the syntactical formula, so to speak. So let's take a look. How about, again, I'm just going to write this up here. Subject, verb, que, plus a second subject, plus our second verb, which is actually conjugated in the subjunctive. How about, I want you to speak Spanish? That's going to be yo quiero. Now that's the regular conjugation. That's the first person indicative of the present tense. Que tú. Now we get to our second verb. That's the one that's going to be in the subjunctive. Remember? Hables español. Okay? Quiero que tú hables español. The reason is because it follows a syntactical structure pattern, and our verb in the main clause is a verb of persuasion or volition, somebody wanting someone else to do something. Take a look at some other examples. How about, she needs me to write? She needs me to write. Okay? Ella, first subject, necesita, necesitar is another verb of persuasion or volition. Que, here the second subject is yo, that I write today, escriba hoy. So she needs que yo, me, to write today. Okay? Sentence, verb, or excuse me, subject, verb, que, second subject, verb. And the key thing again is this verb triggers the subjunctive because it is a verb of persuasion or volition. Another example, you prefer that she goes. Okay? Tú prefieres, a stem changing verb, que ella vaya. Now, that's the subjunctive of the verb ir. It's an irregular. Go back to my lesson on the subjunctive where I give a list of those 6 or 7 irregular verbs in the subjunctive. Okay? But again, we have subject, verb, que, then our dependent clause, and the verb in the subjunctive. Okay? Another verb of persuasion or volition. They request that we listen. Okay? Ellos, first subject, piden another stem changing verb, but it's in the indicative, the regular present tense. Que nosotros escuchemos. Again, that opposite vowel ending. Escuchemos. Okay? Subject, verb, que, subject, verb. Again, and this verb here, like all the others, is a verb of persuasion. The verb is pedir, to request or to ask for. A couple more examples just to drive the point home. We hope you guys stay. And I'm going to use the verb quedarse. Okay? We hope, nosotros, first subject, esperamos, first verb conjugated in the present tense of the indicative, present indicative mood. Okay? Que, and now we're moving on to our subordinate clause. You guys, we're going to use ustedes and conjugate the verb quedarse, a reflexive verb, in the subjunctive. Se queden. It's an AR verb, so opposite vowel ending. Esperamos que ustedes se queden. Okay? Subject 1, verb 1, que. Subject 2, verb 2 in the subjunctive. Verb of volition or persuasion, to hope that someone else does something. And finally, I insist that he works. Yo insisto que él, and then an AR verb, trabaje, okay, with the opposite vowel ending. Again, subject 1, verb 1, que, subject 2, verb 2 in the subjunctive. You can see that syntactical pattern. And again, the key thing is our verbs in the main clause. Do they denote persuasion or volition? That somebody in the first part of the sentence wants somebody in the second part of the sentence to do something. Querer, necesitar, preferir, pedir, esperar, insistir are all good examples of verbs of volition or persuasion that when they're plugged into the first half of this equation here will trigger the subjunctive in the second half. Okay? So that's an introduction to the uses of the subjunctive with verbs of volition or persuasion.